Mum was a big Barbra Streisand fan, along with many other singers such as Crystal Gayle, Dolly Parton, Meat Loaf, and I used to sing along with them too. I've always had a real knack at picking up the words from songs, but back then I used to sing them in my own way. Mum says I was a bit of a daydreamer, an understandable reaction to living in fear of my father. Music had become my fantasy world, my escape route. I'd started extra dance classes just before my 6th birthday and had some success in disco dancing competitions, things like that. One class was held in Mare Street, Hackney, run by Wendy Foley, a thin older lady who smoked like a trooper and was always tanned even in the depths of winter. She told Mum that if I wanted to do ballet, tap or jazz, there was a young Turkish woman called Zaini Halil who ran a dance school a few miles away. Zaini was petite, a very beautiful girl. I remember thinking, I hope I'm like you when I'm older. She'd been to a stage school called Italia Conti, where you did normal lessons but also trained in dance, drama and singing. You would love it, she said. So from then on, Zaini would spend every Saturday teaching me tap, ballet, improvisation and singing. Everything was geared towards me getting to a standard acceptable to the Italia Conti, and the auditions were only 8 months away. She was an excellent teacher, really pushing me hard and throwing new things at me to learn. Somehow I managed to take everything on board, which did wonders for my confidence. My teachers at school followed my progress and were always very encouraging. Yet when some of the other girls found out I was about to audition for stage schools, the bullying began again with renewed vigour. I couldn't understand why, because I hadn't done anything to them. I was just trying to do something I loved. I learned to deal with it by laughing in their faces. Once I laughed at them, it made them feel stupid. Mum took me along on the day of the audition, and we went into a room that seemed absolutely huge with a group of 9 other kids. There was a panel, all from Italia Conti except for a representative from the Inner London Education Authority, which was able to award a limited number of discretionary grants. We were there for the whole day, and we had to do a bit of everything. A bit of drama. I did a speech from the film Hello Dolly, a piece of ballet, which I did to the Phil Collins hit Against All Odds. That had the examiners in fits, as every other hopeful danced to conventional classical pieces such as the Nutcracker or Swan Lake. My modern dance routine was an interpretation of Donna Summer's Hot Stuff, and there was some tap and a song. I chose The Lady's a Tramp. You were supposed to wear a neutral outfit, but not little Martine. Oh no. Even Mum didn't know that I'd slipped my favourite gold catsuit, covered in gold sequins, and some gold shoes into my kit bag. I also had a tube of gold face glitter. There was a break before I had to sing my piece, and I went off to the toilets to make my transformation. When I emerged, dressed top to toe in gold, with gold glitter all over my face, Mum looked horrified. At least this way they'll remember me, I said firmly. Good or bad? There's too many other talented kids here, and if I don't do something to make them take notice, then we might as well go home. By now, one of the teachers had joined us. It's all right, she said. Let her wear it if she wants to. As I remember, this teacher was almost in hysterics. I must have looked quite a sight in my sparkly gold outfit. A letter came through from Italia Conti a few days later. You open it, I said to Mum. No, you open it, she said. No, you do it, Mum, I said again. I was too nervous and excited to do anything, so finally Mum tore open the envelope and screamed with excitement. You've done it, she said, you're in. I couldn't believe it. Italia Conti, one of London's top stage schools, had given me 2nd place, so I was in and I could get a grant. I had it. I was over the moon, I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. Our joy was short-lived. When Mum contacted Elia to confirm the details of the grant, she was told that I wasn't going to get their financial assistance after all, because of a new initiative to encourage ethnic minorities. I was heartbroken, utterly heartbroken. I simply couldn't understand what the problem was. I'd done everything I was supposed to do. Mum tried to explain it to me, but I couldn't comprehend. It seemed so unfair. I was in tears for days because I'd worked so hard. Someone told Mum about a book of grant-making trusts at the library. So every Saturday afternoon, Mum would take me down to the library where we'd wade through this massive book looking for trusts which might be willing to help me. There were literally hundreds. I'd write out the trust's addresses and stick stamps on the envelopes. Mum had written a standard letter which she'd photocopied at work. At the library, she would address it and add the date. I'd slip it in the envelope, and on the way home, we'd stop off at a post box and send them off, always enclosing a stamped address envelope, We must have sent well over 1,000 applications. It wasn't long before we started getting replies. The postman must have thought the Christmas rush had started early at our house because we got sackloads of mail. Every day, more and more letters would arrive, invariably bringing more and more rejections. They were all very polite and apologetic, but the result was always the same. They couldn't help. One of the very last ones we posted was to a Church of England charity based in Moorgate called the Rees Foundation. They were a small organisation which usually gave grants to young lawyers doing their bar exams, medical students needing help to pay their way through medical school, or people training to become classical musicians. To even be considered for a grant from them, you had to live in the Smithfield area of London, or have worked in the Smithfield or City area. Mum had worked in the city most of her life, so she sent off one of our standard letters. Within a week, we had a reply. The Rees Foundation wrote back to say the board meeting intended to discuss my case and consider me for a grant. They planned to take into account my history and background, what Italia Conti had made of me, and why I'd got into the school in the first place. We were ecstatic, even though we were not out of the woods yet. They hadn't said they would give me a grant, but at least they were considering me. I knew this was my very last chance. I'd been going to Italia Conti's Saturday classes by then for about 3 months, and Mum was already in arrears with the fees. John was earning, but with businesses struggling against the recession, he doubted he could have funded me through somewhere as expensive as the Italia Conti. It felt like an eternity before the letter we were praying for dropped on the doormat. Mum could barely pluck up the courage to open it. The letter came from Carol Goddard, who was the administrator of the charity. She said they had considered my case and were delighted to confirm that they would pay my school fees £1,260 a term until I was 16. After all we'd been through, at last someone was willing to help. The uniform was beautiful. It consisted of a blue kilt of light blue tartan with a dark blue check running through it, with white socks and black shoes. Then there was a blue shirt, a dark navy tie bearing the school's logo, a little tiny eye set inside a larger C for Italia Conti. Pupils also had to buy a royal blue jumper, a V-neck with a light blue stripe in the V, and best of all, a navy blue blazer with the IC logo on the left breast pocket. We had just moved to a lovely 3-bedroomed house in Forest Gate, East London, under Mrs. Thatcher's Right to Buy scheme. Italia Conti was at the Barbican in the city. I'd get a mainline train to Liverpool Street and then the tube, which meant getting up every morning at 6:30. The school itself was spread over 8 floors like a tower block. It had a unique smell which I can still feel tingling in my nostrils whenever I cast my mind back. Resin was used to give ballet shoes more grip, but its odour, once mixed with the scent of smelly feet and sweaty bodies, was quite unforgettable and spread through all 8 floors of the school. There were about 25 of us in my year, including 4 or 5 boys, but I reckon I was the cheekiest. The school had its own agency, which put pupils up for jobs in television and theatre, and on my very first day, I strolled up to the woman in charge, Gaynor Sheward, and said, "Hello, have you got any work for me?" "Who are you?" she demanded. "I'm Martine McCutcheon, miss. Have you got any auditions or anything I can go on? If you can get me out of schoolwork, that would be brilliant," I said. Gaynor used to encourage me to speak more correctly. "We'll get you talking standard English if it's the last thing we do," she'd say, and they did. I spoke beautifully when I left school. It was only when I got into EastEnders that I went back to my old habits. At least I know I can sound posh if I have to. One of my first auditions was for American Kool-Aid, a synthetic-tasting drink. I had to wear a blue catsuit while almost every bit of exposed skin was painted blue. I looked a right idiot, even if I did get paid £350. My first school friend, Claudia Hill, didn't fare much better with her first ad. When the time came for her to step in front of the cameras, an assistant passed her a cardboard box. "What's this for?" she asked. "It's to stick over your head." The other 2 big London stage schools were Sylvia Young's and Arts Educational. Kids from the Sylvia Young School were all very confident, very loud and very much in your face. They weren't so hot on the training at Sylvia Young's, but they were very hot on personality. You could always spot Sylvia Young kids at auditions because they acted like your stereotypical stage school brats. Having said that, I can't knock 'em because her kids kept getting work. My mum would say, Thank God you ain't like them lot, Martine. You'd drive me mad. I mean, you drive me mad as it is, but thank God you ain't like them. Arts educational was all about discipline in the classical sense. While arts educational pupils would outdance all the Sylvia Young lot technically, their personalities seemed to suffer. They were the kids that always seemed to be stood quietly in the corner at auditions. And what about us Conti lot? We were quite loud, yes, but nowhere near as brash as the kids from Sylvia Young's. If anything, we were in the middle compared to the other two schools. At Conti's, we were all very into our training and were good at auditions. I know we also felt threatened by Sylvia's lot. The first time I ever came across them was at an audition when I was maybe 11 years old, and they were downstairs singing Scows. It seemed so pretentious, so showy. I didn't think people like that really existed. Everyone hears about the bratty stage school types with larger-than-life personalities, but to see a group of them en masse is a real eye-opener, and even though you would see the same girls over and over again at subsequent auditions, it was still a daunting spectacle. As I was olive-skinned with dark hair, I tended to do a lot of advertisements which were to be shown in places such as Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, Italy and France. In the Arabian ads, I had to do some crazy things like sing in Arabic about chocolate mini rolls and Mickey Mouse hamburgers. My first television job came up after I'd only been at Italia Conti for a few months. I landed a part in a children's series called Bluebirds, where I was to meet someone who would eventually become my mother-in-law. Well, in EastEnders anyway. Her name, of course, was Barbara Windsor. Bullying seems to go on at every school, and Italia Conti was no exception. This time it was my success that was causing the problem. I remember this girl coming up to me and she said she'd heard my mum was paying the Italia Conti agency to get me work. "You're having a laugh, aren't you?" I said. "Look at you, little rich girl with your Italian clothes. We've got a settee at home with no legs and we can't afford anything better, so don't tell me we're paying an agency. The only way I pay an agency is by being talented, and if you don't like it because I get jobs, then tough titty." This period of my life, of course, coincided with my transition into womanhood. And yet, other than hanging out with classmates like Giuseppe and James, boys didn't really figure in my life at all. I had no interest in them whatsoever. If someone told me so-and-so fancies you, I'd be mortified with embarrassment. "Oh no, that makes me feel really ill," I'd say. Puberty can be a horrible time for kids, but I seem to have it pretty easy. I never had spots. I never had trouble with anything like that. I think I got my first period when I was 14, though my boobs didn't grow properly until I was 16. I never wanted boobs. I never wanted them because I was brought up believing that the best figure in the world was a ballerina's. You didn't want boobs and you didn't want hips, but then almost as soon as I left school, I got curves. It wasn't until I was 12 that I auditioned for my first big show. It was a production of Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, written by and starring Anthony Newley at the Churchill Theatre in Bromley. It's a musical about a guy who goes through his life doing what he wants, womanising and generally being selfish. When we arrived for the audition and walked into the auditorium, there were so many kids there my heart sank. They needed 2 girls for each team and they'd already selected the first girl for the A team, a pretty blonde girl with a big grin and bundles of energy. Her name was Denise Oughton, now known to millions as the television star Denise Van Outen. At the audition, I sang Honey Bun from South Pacific. Mum was much more nervous than I was, so much so she had to go downstairs and lock herself in the toilet in case her jitters rubbed off on me. We then sat through dozens of other kids doing their pieces while I was getting more and more nervous. Eventually, they called every child back on stage. Anthony Newley thanked everyone and said we'd all done well, and then he said, "I'm going to call out some names and I'd like those to take a step back." He began to reel off the names, and suddenly I heard him say mine. I thought, "Oh, that's it then," and felt pretty gutted. Then he called the others to the front and said, "Thank you very much for your time, but you've been unsuccessful this time." Me and the other girls at the back just looked at each other as it suddenly dawned on us that we hadn't been asked to stand at the back because we were being rejected, but because we'd been picked. And of all the people I could have been teamed up with, I was put with Denise. She was to play Jane and I was to play her sister Susan. We were both thrilled, though I was utterly deflated at the costume fitting because I had to wear pink and Denise black. I'd look at her feeling green with envy at her remarkable figure and poise. Anything she put on looked great. We were signed up for a 6-week run at Bromley, doing every other night, and we earned about £70 a week. We played Anthony Newley's daughters. My character had a right old time, and in the story got pregnant at 13 and then got married. I had to have my hair corkscrew curled and I looked just awful. After Bromley, the show transferred to the Lyric Theatre in Shaftesbury Avenue, London, my first appearance in the West End. The opening was very exciting. Joan Collins, who had been married to Anthony, was there, as was Frankie Vaughan and a whole load of other stars. Obviously Mum was there too, trying to take my picture next to the stars. She even had the nerve to ask Joan Collins if she minded being photographed with me. Joan, being Joan, was very lovely and said I looked fantastic in my horrible stage gear before happily posing for a photo with me. Afterwards, Mum kept trying to sneak a look behind Joan's ears to see if she'd had cosmetic surgery. Later, she whispered, "I didn't find none. She looks great, but I had to check." Denise had a wicked sense of humour and used to take the piss out of me because I was starting to grow hair on my legs as puberty developed. It was a little more obvious than on someone fair like Denise, and she'd never miss a chance to point that out, saying things like, "Oi, hairy legs, shave 'em," in front of everyone at rehearsals. I would feebly stammer back, "But they've only just started growing." "Just started growing? You want to get 'em shaved, girl?" I was so embarrassed I wanted to die. I really did. I mean, what 12-year-old wouldn't be humiliated by being told to shave their legs in public? Denise was always a really attractive girl, though I remember she used to dye her hair even when she was just in her teens. Mind you, look who's talking. I used to have a corkscrew perm. We both thought we looked the bee's knees, whereas I suspect we both actually looked quite hideous. I had a strange experience with the legendary star while doing Stop the World, although I never actually met the man concerned. After the performances at the Lyric, I'd wait in my dressing room with my chaperone until my mum arrived to take me home. One evening, just as we were leaving, I asked her if she knew who Peter O'Toole was. "Yeah," she said. "He's dead famous. He was in the film Lawrence of Arabia and lots of other things." "Why?" "Have a look," I said, pointing at the open window. She looked out, and there was Peter O'Toole, hanging out of the window of a nearby theatre where he was performing in a one-man show. "He's always drunk," I said, and he was too. I can remember him regularly leaning out the window and bellowing at the top of his voice, "I hate fucking London!"